Welcome to this explainer. Look, I'm super thrilled to have you here today because we're going to tackle something that every single product person deals with, but nobody really talks about, and that is the absolute terror of the blank roadmap. If you've ever built a product, you know exactly what I mean. You sit down, the whole team's waiting, the columns are just totally empty, and you feel this massive crushing pressure to fill them up. And honestly, this quote right here, it hits the nail on the head. Every roadmap tool ever made shares one quiet assumption, that you arrive already knowing what to build. Just think about that for a second. Most of the software out there acts like this command deck, managing how you execute tasks. But the very first thing it demands from you, filling in those blank spaces, is arguably the hardest part of the whole job. So we really need to stop avoiding the big, uncomfortable question upstream: what should even be on the roadmap in the first place? It's honestly kind of wild how many sophisticated tools just completely gloss over the step. They basically leave founders and PMs to just guess what to build next based on, a gut feeling. Well, today we're diving into a seriously fascinating piece of tech that is designed entirely to answer this exact question. To get there, we'll quickly cover 6 things: the roadmap's quiet assumption, why ideation breaks down, the Claude Codex Council, mapping roadmap gaps, breaking down features, spin-offs, and services, and finally, why you make the call. Let's get right into it. Okay, part 1. The roadmap's quiet assumption. Like we just talked about, our baseline way of operating right now is totally skewed towards execution. We love celebrating when we cross things off a list, right? But we almost never stop to interrogate how those things actually got onto the list in the first place. So enter IdeaClist. It's essentially an idea engine. It actively scouts the web, reads the gaps in your current roadmap, and proposes really specific, scored work to fill them. In the ecosystem we're looking at today, there's an execution tool called ThrowMark. IdeaClist is its companion. If ThrowMark is the engine that executes the work, IdeaClist is the engine that populates it. It completely shifts our focus from just doing the work to finding the work that's actually worth doing.
Moving on to part 2, why ideation breaks down. Let's talk about the tooling gap.
See, when you're building a lot, your main failure mode isn't running out of things to do. It's running out of well-aimed, high-quality ideas. When we're under pressure, we tend to fall back on whatever's top of mind. We run down the same old mental grooves, maybe rush out a few competitor clones. But the real magic, that lies in what's most valuable. We're talking about adjacent products just hiding in plain sight, things we completely miss because we're so caught up in the daily grind of shipping.
And hey, here's a really reassuring truth for you. Having a quiet, empty roadmap is not a character flaw. It's literally just a tooling gap. Ideation is real, genuinely taxing work. But because it doesn't have a hard deadline and because it doesn't produce something perfectly shippable the exact day you do it, it just gets deferred. It gets skipped when things get stressful. So the roadmap quietly fills up with whatever was easiest to think of at like 4 p.m. on a Friday. But the good news? Tooling gaps can absolutely be closed.
Which brings us to part 3, the Claude Codex Council, and how this engine actually generates ideas.
Let's break down the architecture here because it's super cool. If you've ever asked a standard single AI model for product ideas, you already know what happens. A lone model gives you one pass. It sounds super confident, sure, but the output is usually this plausible, kind of generic list. Basically, it's boring. IdeaClist, on the other hand, uses a council, specifically Claude and Codex working together. It proposes, it critiques, and it refines. This setup surfaces actual disagreements and catches those weak ideas that sound deceptively good at first glance. It's exactly like the difference between brainstorming all by yourself in your office versus bouncing ideas off a brilliantly sharp colleague who isn't afraid to look at your whiteboard and say, "Yeah, that one's obvious, let's dig deeper." But here's the thing. An idea generated in a vacuum is still just a guess, no matter how smart that AI council is. That's why IdeaClist actually acts as a researcher. It scouts the web for live opportunities. It analyzes the entire landscape, tracks your competitors, and watches for adjacent market moves. By anchoring its suggestions in real-world, real-time data, it transforms a loose guess into a highly justified proposal. So it doesn't just say, "Hey, do this." It says, "Do this, and here is exactly what's happening in the market right now to prove why."
All right, part 4, mapping the roadmap gaps. This is where deterministic targeting comes in.
This is where the magic of an open architecture really shines. Because ThrowMark roadmaps are stored simply as plain files right on your disk, IdeaClist can read them directly. You don't have to wrangle some complex API. There are no convoluted permissions to grant. It securely reads your project read-only to understand what you are actually, genuinely building. And that context? It's absolutely vital. What it does with that information is create a deterministic gap map. So for example, if your build category is completely overflowing with features, but your distribution category is basically empty, the gap map sees that exact structural weakness. And it's deterministic, meaning the exact same roadmap will always yield the exact same analysis. Because of this, IdeaClist suggestions aren't just scattershot ideas fired off in the dark. They are highly targeted payloads, designed specifically to fill the precise holes in your current strategy.
That brings us to part 5, features, spin-offs, and services. Or, as I like to call it, roadmap intelligence.
When these proposals come back to you, they're actually categorized into 3 distinct research lanes. First, you have features. These are your concrete additions to your existing product. Second, you have spin-offs. These are entirely separate, adjacent products that might be hiding right inside your current offering. Think about, realizing an internal tool you built could actually be its own standalone SaaS product. And third, services. These are ways to generate revenue and value that aren't software features at all. Honestly, this is a quietly genius design choice. Why? Because founders systematically over-index on features. We literally always just want to add more buttons to the app. Splitting the output up like this forces us to widen our aperture and ask what the most valuable next move actually is, no matter what category it falls into.
And the best part? Every single one of these proposals arrives fully scored. They get graded on impact, evidence, fit, and effort, which, by the way, directly matches exactly how the Thrallmark execution engine ranks its backlog. So you aren't just getting some throwaway one-liner that says build a mobile app, you're getting a highly defensible, bite-sized business case backed by actual sources, completely ready to be prioritized right then and there.
Let's look at part 6, you make the call. This is all about human judgment.
Here's the life cycle of an idea in this whole new paradigm. Step 1, the engine does the tireless, massive research to generate and aim the proposals. Step 2, it quietly drops that scored work right into your project inbox. And then, it stops. Step 3 is entirely up to you. The human reviews the proposals to accept them, route them to a different project, or just outright dismiss them. I think this division of labor is incredibly empowering. The machine does the grueling, exhausting research, you do the totally irreplaceable work of human judgment and vision.
What makes this entire setup so robust is that the contract is totally open. You are never, ever locked into some walled garden where a single vendor controls both your ideation and your execution. Because the whole thing is built on plain text files, any tool can read the roadmap and drop suggestions into your inbox. IdeaClist just happens to be the first, and honestly most complete example of this philosophy in action.
The underlying philosophy here is simple. IdeaClist proposes, you dispose. You are never just handed a roadmap that someone, or some AI, decided for you. Instead, you're handed a stack of meticulously, well-argued, thoroughly researched options, and you retain the absolute power to choose.
So I want to leave you with one final provocative thought today. Think about your current workflow for a second. Now ask yourself, what happens to your product, to your team's velocity, and honestly to your own sanity when you start making decisions from a meticulously researched menu of validated options, instead of perpetually staring down a terrifyingly blank page? Closing that upstream ideation gap might just be the highest leverage move you can make this year. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, and I will catch you in the next one.